Dawn in the cold hall. You wake before the first bell, when the darkness still feels thick enough to weigh upon the stone walls. The air is sharp in your lungs, and your breath leaves in slow, ghostly curls that linger a moment before dissolving into the gloom. Above your head, the beams are black silhouettes against a paler, uncertain ceiling. Somewhere beyond these walls, the crows are restless in their roosts, but their calls are muffled by the narrow slit of your chamber window. The bed is warm, at least in the small cocoon your body has created, layered with woolen blankets and a fur throw laid heavy over your legs. Yet even as you linger a moment, you can feel the cold creeping in from the edges, from where the mattress does not touch your sides, from the open space between the covers and your chin. That creeping cold will not wait for you to be ready. The castle breathes it into every gap, into every seam of cloth. Draw in a long, steady breath and slide your feet down toward the rush mat beside the bed. The mat is coarse and braided, and it is blessedly dry, not always guaranteed in the months when dampness seeps through the floor stones. Your bare toes curl instinctively against the chill. You reach for the small oil lamp on the bedside stool, the wick trimmed neatly the night before, and strike flint to steel until a soft flame blooms. It casts an amber circle, illuminating the faint frost feathering the inside of the window panes. The stillness is deep at this hour. In the distance, the kitchens are silent. The great hall beyond your chamber is nothing more than a breath of air under the door. You pull your first layer of clothing from the chest at the foot of your bed, a linen shift, cool against your skin but light enough to allow the layers above it to breathe. Over it goes a woolen kirtle, the thick fabric slightly scratchy at your neck, but comforting in its weight. Outside, the castle's outer yard is hidden in shadow. The guards on the wall walk slowly, their boots muffled on frosted stone. You know their route by heart. The pattern of their steps is as familiar to you as the sound of your own heartbeat. You pause, listening for it, one of your small morning rituals, and smile faintly when you catch the soft thud of the sentry's tread crossing the east battlement. Your next act is to pull the heavy cloak from its peg by the door. Its hood falls forward, dimming the light of your lamp as you lift it. The wool holds the faint scent of last night's hearth fire, and it wraps you in a cocoon of remembered warmth. The clasp clicks into place, a small sound that seems louder than it is in the deep quiet. In the corridor beyond your door, the air is colder still. Your breath unfurls before you, and the stones underfoot hold the memory of 100 years of winters. The walls here are bare, tapestries are reserved for the warmer rooms, so the corridors remain stark and echoing. As you move, your hand trails the wall, feeling the cool grit of the mortar between stones. The first stop is always the same, the small alcove that leads toward the kitchens. The door stands there, bolted from within for the night, and you lay your palm against the wood to feel the faintest vibration of life, the slow settling of stored barrels, the quiet shift of cooling hearthstones. You'll not open it yet. The servants will stir soon enough. For now, it is enough to stand here, lamp in hand, watching the wick's light ripple against the rough boards. This is the moment each day when you become aware of your role again, not in the bustle of tasks, but in the silent assurance that the castle, its people, its stores and its comforts, however modest, will be cared for. The weight of that thought is not a burden. It is an anchor, a promise. And so, with the lamp's glow leading the way, you turn toward the long passage that will take you to the storerooms, the ledgers, and the endless, quiet work that keeps a stone house alive. First walk through silent corridors. The passage ahead is narrow, its stones uneven from centuries of footsteps, lords, ladies, servants, messengers and guards, all leaving their mark without meaning to. At this hour, the air is still enough that you can hear your own breathing, the faint hiss of it slipping past your lips. Each step sends a muted tap echoing along the walls, traveling farther than you can see in the lamplight. Your lamp throws shadows that sway and bend with each movement of your hand. In the wavering glow, carved details in the stone seem to come alive, the curling edge of a vine motif above a doorway, the faint chisel marks of a mason's tool still visible after all these years. These are the things most never notice in daylight's rush, yet you know them like a seamstress knows each stitch of her work. You pass the first arrow slit, a thin wound in the wall that frames a slice of pre-dawn sky. The horizon is bruised purple, with the faintest whisper of gold just beginning to lift behind the hills. A gust slips through the slit, carrying with it the smell of cold earth and smoke from some far-off chimney in the village below. The touch of that air makes your fingers tighten on the lamp's handle. At the bend in the corridor, you pause to listen. It's a habit born of caution rather than fear. The servants' quarters are still, the guards have not yet made their shift change, and the kitchen stair remains silent. This is your moment to sense the castle's mood, to catch any small wrongness before it grows. Listen for drips that might mean a leak, for creaks that do not belong to wind, for the muffled sound of movement where none should be. Today, all is as it should be. A few more steps bring you to the side gallery. The floor here changes to worn oak planks that give slightly beneath your weight. The boards are cold, their grain polished smooth by countless boots, slippers and bare feet. On the right, tall windows, unshuttered for the moment, show the blackness beginning to soften outside. For them, the courtyard looks like a sleeping beast, still, solid and patient. As you walk, your fingers brush against the wall hangings in this stretch. They're older than you, faded from deep crimson to a softened rose, their embroidered patterns worn at the edges. They catch the warmth of your touch, offering a brief kindness before the air turns chill again at the next corner. You take a slow breath, allowing your steps to match the rhythm of the castle's breathing, a slow, steady pulse in the way the wind curls through its narrow ways, in the way silence settles after each small sound. You have walked these halls in every season, in moments of joy and of grief, and you know their every turn. The corridors are more than stone, they are memory, continuity, and quiet witness. Ahead lies the short flight of stairs to the great hall's upper landing. The day's duties wait there, the storerooms, the ledgers, the servants who will look to you for direction. But for just a moment longer, you linger here in the hush, letting the comfort of this stillness sink deep into your bones. Soon, the bells will ring and the first wave of activity will spill through the halls. Until then, these corridors are yours alone. Warming the heart of the kitchen door looms ahead, heavy and stout, its oak darkened by years of smoke and steam. The iron latch is cool against your palm as you lift it, the hinge giving a low sigh that disappears into the deeper hush within. Inside, the air is even colder than the corridor, the night's fire reduced to a bed of dull red embers crouched in the great hearth. Their faint glow is the only sign of life in this sleeping space. You set your lamp on the broad wooden table, its light spilling across bowls stacked from the night before, the sheen of pewter jugs, and the pale dome of a covered bread loaf left to soften for the morning meal. The smells are a mingling of wood smoke, dry herbs hanging from the beams, and the faint sweetness of yesterday's baking. It is a kitchen's perfume layered, lived in, and warm in memory even when the air is biting cold. Kneeling at the hearth, you take up the poker and stir the embers. They wake reluctantly, shedding a few sparks that swirl upward before winking out. You feed them small twigs from the bundle kept near the enderon, their crackle shy at first, then stronger as the fire remembers itself. Soon, a small flame licks the edges of a thicker log, casting new light into the corners of the room. Shadows shift across the flagstones, chasing away the grip of the night. From the cupboard beside the hearth, you fetch the earthenware pot that will hold the day's first water for tea or broth. The bucket by the door is still half full from yesterday's draw, the surface cold and glassy. You pour with care, listening to the hollow sound as water meets clay. The pot is set near the fire, where thin wisps of steam will soon rise. Before the servants stir, this is your moment to ensure the kitchen's heart beats smoothly. You check the hanging herbs, rosemary still fragrant, sage leaves crisp, lavender fading but still sweet. You run a finger along the smooth edge of the kneading board, noting the faint grooves worn by generations of hands. The salt jar is nearly half empty. You make a quiet note to replenish it before the week's end. Outside the narrow window, the world is changing color, black into blue, blue into the faint wash of grey that signals the approach of dawn. You can hear a soft rustle from beyond the door, the scullery maid rising, the scrape of her shoes on the stairs. Soon the kitchen will fill with voices, the slap of duff, the rhythmic chop of knives. But for now, the space is yours, and in the glow of the growing fire, you feel the warmth begin to seep into the very bones of the castle. You take one last glance around the room, your eyes lingering on the tidy row of kettles, the neat stacks of bowls, the gentle dance of light on the stone walls. Everything is ready. The day can begin. The ring of keys at your waist, you lift the leather strap from its peg and fasten it around your waist, the weight of the iron keys settling against your hip with a soft, familiar clink. Each key is different, some long and slender with teeth as fine as lace, others squat and heavy with notches worn smooth by decades of turning in their locks. Together they form a chorus of small metal voices that speak only to you. The largest key belongs to the great storeroom, where sacks of grain and barrels of ale rest in neat rows. Another, with an ornate bow shaped like a twisted vine, opens the strong box where precious spices are kept, cinnamon, saffron, and pepper, each more valuable than silver. A smaller key, blackened with age, turns the lock of the still room a place of jars, tinctures and drying flowers, where remedies are born in the quiet hours. You run your fingers across the ring, feeling the chill of the iron seep into your skin. It is not just the keys you carry, it is the quiet trust of the household, the assurance that what should be safe will remain safe, that what is needed will be ready when the moment comes. No one questions your right to them, not the guards, not the steward, not even the Lord himself. The keys are your badge, your silent authority. As you step into the corridor, the keys sway gently at your side, their sound a companion in the echoing stillness. You know by touch alone which one you will need before you even reach the next door. The rhythm of unlocking and locking is second nature. Lift the ring, find the weight you seek, fit it into the waiting mouth of iron, feel the smooth turn, and hear the satisfying click. The first lock you open this morning is to the dry pantry, where cheeses wrapped in cloth slumber on wooden shelves and wheels of salted meat hang from hooks overhead. The air inside is cool and faintly sweet, the scent of preservation. You make a quick check, no signs of spoilage, no unwelcome nibblings from mice, and lock the door once more, the iron bolt sliding home with a muted thud. Each turn of a key marks the start or end of some small, necessary task. You think of them almost like the chapters of your day: open, tend, close, open, tend, close. The keys never leave you until the day is done and every store, chest, and cabinet is secured. Only then will they hang again on their peg by your bed, silent until the next morning calls them back to life. You adjust the strap at your waist, letting the ring settle into its comfortable spot against your hip, and turn toward the heavy double doors that lead to the storerooms. The next key you'll choose is the one that will let you step into the quiet heart of the castle supplies, where the true wealth of the household waits in sacks and barrels, under your watchful care. Unlocking the storerooms, the great storeroom doors are taller than a man, built from thick oak planks bound with black iron bands. They are meant to resist more than the weather. Here is where the castle's survival rests during lean months. You pause a moment before them, listening. The storerooms have their own silence, a heavy, watchful kind, as if the grain and ale and salted meat inside are holding their breath until you let them see the light. From your ring, you find the key by its weight alone the heaviest, with a bow shaped like a narrow shield. It fits the lock with a perfect familiarity. The tumblers turn with a slow, deliberate grind, and the latch lifts free. As the doors swing inward, the scent of dry earth, aged wood, and stored harvest greets you. Inside, the air is cool and faintly dusty. On one side, great sacks of barley and oats are stacked in orderly rows, each tied with thick cord. Run your hand along the top of a sack, feeling the firmness that tells you it is well packed, safe from moisture. On the other side, barrels of ale rest on their sides, the hoops still tight, a faint tang of malt rising from the wood. Further in, shelves hold baskets of dried beans, jars of pickled vegetables and crocks of butter sealed with wax. Hanging from beams overhead are strings of onions and garlic, their papery skins rustling softly in the draught from the open door. There is a satisfaction in this sight, not of luxury, but of security. You know that what stands here, carefully counted and guarded, will see the household through the days when the fields lie bare under frost. You kneel to check the corners, where the light does not reach. Your eyes sweep for any sign of dampness, any hint of gnawing from unwelcome visitors. The traps remain undisturbed. The floorboards are dry. You take note of 2 sacks nearly empty, to be replaced from the outer store before the week ends. Moving methodically, you lift the lid on a barrel of salt to ensure the supply is still clean and dry. Salt is more than seasoning here, it is preservation, the quiet defender of the larder's wealth. A pinch between your fingers reassures you, crisp, fine, and pure. When you are satisfied, you step back and take in the storeroom once more. This is the unseen heart of the castle, its true strength in the face of winter or siege. Without it, stone walls mean little. You close the doors with the same care you opened them, turning the key until the lock clicks home. The ring at your waist is heavier again, as if the storerooms themselves have returned their trust to you for another day. You turn toward the next destination, the ledger desk, where the story of every key, every sack, and every barrel will be written in ink. The records must match the reality, and it is your hand that will ensure they do. Balancing the household ledger, the ledger desk waits in a small alcove just off the great hall, away from the noise and draught of the main corridor. It is a sturdy table of oak, worn smooth where countless hands have rested, and at its center lies the thick, leather-bound book that holds the quiet memory of the household's comings and goings. Its clasp is simple brass, cool to the touch as you release it, opening the cover to reveal pages lined in careful ink. Each page is ruled in columns, the left for what enters, the right for what leaves. Between them, a narrow margin for notes, where you record the small details that numbers alone cannot hold, the quality of a batch of flour, the tardiness of a delivery, the weather on the day a barrel of ale was sealed. These details are not decoration. They are the threads that tie each figure to its meaning. You uncap the inkwell and dip the quill, watching the dark ink cling to its tip before settling into the page. This morning, you record the opening of the storeroom, 2 sacks of oats removed for kitchen use, 1 crock of butter taken to be softened for baking. Salt barrel inspected, condition sound. The script is steady and unhurried. A ledger is not a place for haste. An error here can ripple through the weeks like a frayed stitch in a tapestry. You pause between entries, recalling the exact count from your inspection, letting your mind walk once more through the storeroom shelves. Beside the book sits a small stack of folded papers, notes left by the steward, the cook, and the gardener. The cook requests more cinnamon before the month's end. The gardener warns of frost that may claim the last of the winter greens. Each note is read, considered, and tucked into its place between the pages, ready to be acted upon when the time comes. In the stillness of the alcove, the scratch of your quill is the only sound, a rhythm as familiar as your own breathing. The work is precise, yes, but there is comfort in its order, in knowing that every loaf of bread, every candle, every bolt of cloth has a place in the castle's memory. The morning's entries are complete. You blot the ink with a square of soft cloth and close the ledger gently, as though the book itself might need its rest. The clasp clicks shut. The records are safe for another day. You rise from the desk, the weight of the keys shifting at your side, and step toward the servants' quarters. The day is waking in earnest now, and there are people to guide, tasks to oversee, and a household to keep in quiet, steady motion. Overseeing the servants' morning tasks, by the time you reach the servants' quarters, the hush of the early corridors has given way to a softer, busier hum. Wooden doors stand ajar, and the scent of damp wool, drying boots, and fresh bread drifts into the hallway. Here is where the castle begins to stir in earnest, not with the trumpet of grand events, but with the quiet, steady machinery of daily life. The kitchen maid, sleeves rolled high, is already kneading dough at the table near the hearth, her hands pressing and folding with the rhythm of someone who has done it since childhood. The scullery boy, hair still sleep-tossed, carries a bucket of water that sloshes with each careful step. You nod to them both, offering a warm word that draws a brief smile before they return to their work. At the far end of the room, 2 older women are sorting linens, castle towels, tablecloths, and the plain sheets for the servants' own beds. Their fingers move deftly, feeling for frayed edges and small tears. One holds up a cloth with a thin rip along the seam. You take it in hand, noting its wear, and promise to send it to the sewing bench for mending. The stable boy appears at the doorway, cap in hand, to ask if the feed store can be opened for the horses' morning ration. You send him with a ladle measure of oats from the small feed barrel in the kitchen's outer room. Enough for this morning, but reminding him the main store will be checked later in the week. The castle supplies are a careful balance, too much given at once, and the winter's end may come with shelves bare. You move from one corner to another, your presence both a guide and a reassurance. You glance over the shoulder of the young maid sweeping the corridor, pointing out a patch of rushes that needs replacing where the straw has worn thin. In the washroom, you test the water heating in the copper cauldron, adjusting the logs beneath to keep it just below a boil for laundering. All the while, you keep your ear tuned for the small things, the tone of a voice, the pause in a task, the quiet exchange between 2 workers. These are the signs that something is amiss, or in need of attention. Today, you hear only the sounds of steady labor, the thud of kneading, the soft slap of wet laundry against the washboard, the creak of a broom's handle as it pushes along the stone. Before you leave, you step back toward the kitchen hearth. The fire you kindled earlier is now a cheerful blaze, the air filled with the smell of rising bread and warming broth. The servants work around it with practiced ease, their movements weaving together into the morning's first quiet harmony. Satisfied, you adjust the keys at your waist and turn toward the corridor that leads to the sewing room. There are repairs to check before the day grows too full. Tending to repairs and small fixes, the sewing room is a narrow chamber tucked against the south wall, where the light, when it comes, will be softer and longer. For now, it is dim, the pale dawn still stretching its fingers across the horizon. The smell of the room is familiar, a mixture of wool, linen, and the faint metallic tang of sewing needles kept in their small wooden cases. On a trestle table, folded stacks of clothing and hangings await attention. You run your hand over the top pile, a heavy woolen curtain from the great hall, its edge frayed where the wind has pulled it against the stone frame for too many winters. The weave is still strong, it will take only a careful binding stitch to make it serviceable again. Beside it lies a worn tunic from one of the older servants, its elbows patched twice before and now in need of a third. You note the neatness of the earlier repairs, small, even stitches that speak of a patient hand, and you decide to keep the work consistent, matching thread and pattern so the patch looks as if it has always belonged. In the corner, a basket holds household cloths for mending, table linens with wine stains faded to pale shadows, towels with edges unraveling, and a few sleeves torn where hooks or nails caught them. You take one towel in your lap, the fabric coarse but sturdy, and begin to hem its edge while the room is still quiet. The needle slides in and out, the thread pulling snug, the sound no louder than the whisper of breath. For wall pegs, you lift a length of fine cloth the edge of a bed canopy from the master's chamber. The embroidery, though faded, is delicate, tiny leaves in green and gold. One section has loosened, the thread slack where the fabric has stretched. You thread a finer needle and work the pattern back into place, each stitch a patient echo of the craftsperson who first made it, perhaps years before you were born. The light at the narrow window grows slowly brighter, tracing the grain of the table and catching on the gleam of scissors laid neatly in a row. Outside, a rooster calls from the outer yard, and you know the rest of the household will soon be in full motion. You set aside the finished pieces, curtain hem secure, tunic patched, towel mended, embroidery restored, each ready to return to its place in the rhythm of castle life. You gather your tools, sliding needles into their case, wrapping thread so they will not tangle. The keys at your waist jingle softly as you stand, reminding you of the next duty awaiting your hand, a meeting with the merchant who brings goods to the castle gate. His wagon will hold fabrics, spices, and small treasures from beyond the walls, and it is your task to see that everyone is as promised. Welcoming a travelling merchant, the outer gate's small postern door opens to a breath of air that carries the sense of frost and far-off hearth smoke. Beyond, in the cobbled yard between the inner and outer walls, a modest wagon stands with its wheels still damp from the morning dew. A brown mare, broad and sure-footed, shifts her weight patiently while the merchant tends to the leather straps at her harness. You recognize him at once, a man whose visits are regular as the turning of the seasons. His cloak, though travel-worn, is well kept, and the edges of his gloves are stained faintly with the dust of the road. At his approach, he removes his cap in greeting, a polite dip of the head that carries both respect and familiarity. From the wagon, he produces the day's delivery, a bolt of undied linen wrapped in oilcloth, a smaller bundle of dyed wool in deep russet, a sealed jar of honey thick with the scent of summer, and a small wooden box bound with twine. The twine bears the mark of the spice trader from the southern coast, a sign you have learned to look for. You begin your inspection without hurry, unwrapping the linen to test its weave between your fingers. It is tight and even, with the soft strength that promises long wear. The wool is rich in colour, the dye deep and steady across its length. You lift the lid from the honey jar just enough to breathe in its fragrance, and the air fills with the warmth of wild flowers long faded from the fields. The wooden box you open last, sliding the twine free and lifting its lid to reveal 3 small cloth sacks inside. One holds cinnamon sticks curled like little scrolls, another holds black peppercorns, sharp and clean in their scent, and the third cradles a tiny pouch of saffron, the threads red as embers in firelight. You measure their weight in your palm, check their dryness, and nod your approval. A brief exchange settles the matter of payment. You sign the merchant's tally sheet with a steady hand, noting each item's quality in your own small ledger later. The merchant accepts the coin with a grateful smile, and you offer him a cup of warm ale before he turns back toward the road. It is not only kindness. Such gestures are threads in the fabric of reliable trade. When the wagon rolls away, you signal for the servants to carry the goods inside. The linen will go to the sewing room, the wool to the wardrobe chest for winter repairs, the honey to the pantry, and the spices to the locked cupboard in the still room. Each item will be guarded as carefully as the keys you carry, for in their own way they are treasures as valuable as gold. With the gate secure once more, you turn toward the chapel, not for duty, but for a small moment of quiet in the morning's gathering pace. A quiet moment in the chapel is never truly dark, even before you open its door. A narrow window of coloured glass faces east, and now, with the morning fully risen, soft bands of gold, blue and rose lie across the flagstones like spilled silk. You step inside, and the hush enfolds you, different from the silence of corridors or storerooms. This is a quiet that feels layered, as if 100 whispered prayers still float in the air. The scent is a mingling of beeswax from the candles, old wood polished with oil, and the faint mineral coolness of stone. Your footsteps sound almost too loud, so you slow them, letting your pace match the gentle rhythm of the place. The altar is modest, a linen cloth edged with careful embroidery, a small brass cross, and a book of psalms resting closed. You reach for the candle at the side, striking flint to steel until the wick catches and blooms into a soft, golden flame. Its light joins the glow spilling from the window, together bright enough to cast away the last shadows clinging in the corners. For a moment, you simply stand there, breathing in the warmth, letting the stillness settle into your bones. Kneeling on the cushioned bench, you fold your hands loosely and let your thoughts wander. This is not the time for grand requests or elaborate words. Instead, you think of the day ahead, the ledgers to keep, the storerooms to guard, the servants to guide, and you ask only for steady hands and a clear mind. You picture the faces of those under your care, from the cook with her ready smile to the smallest page still learning the maze of corridors, and you send each a silent blessing. Your eyes drift to the walls, where painted saints gaze down in worn but patient colours. Some have faded into mere outlines, yet their presence feels undiminished, as though they listen as intently now as they did when the paint was fresh. The chapel's light shifts as the sun climbs higher, the gold deepening, the blue growing richer, and for a heartbeat the air itself seems to glow. When you rise, the candle's flame bends slightly toward you, as if in farewell. You pinch it out gently, leaving a thread of smoke curling upward to the beams. The quiet stays with you as you step back into the hall, a small warmth carried inward, ready to steady you through the day's noise and decisions. The great hall lies ahead, waiting for its morning inspection. Soon, its long tables will fill, its high walls will echo with voices, and you will see to it that all is in proper order before the first guest or guard steps inside. Inspecting the great hall, the double doors yield to a slow push, their iron hinges groaning softly as you step inside. At this hour, the great hall is a vast, dim cavern of stone and timber, holding the last cool breath of night. High beams disappear into shadow overhead, while the pale morning light seeps in through the tall windows, painting long, narrow shapes across the rush-covered floor. You pause a moment at the threshold, letting your eyes take in the whole scene. The long tables and benches stand neatly aligned, but a few of the rush mats have been pushed askew, revealing bare stone beneath. One by one, you set them straight, feeling the faint crunch of dried herbs mixed among the rushes, lavender and rosemary, placed to keep the air sweet. Moving toward the great hearth, you note the ashes banked neatly from the night before. The fire here will not be lit until later, when the household gathers, but you make a mental note to have the chimney swept before the next heavy burning. A stray draught whispers across the back of your neck, and you turn toward the far wall where a tapestry hangs loosely at one corner. The fabric sways ever so slightly, proof of the wind slipping through the stones. Crossing the hall, you smooth the tapestry back into place and secure it with its wooden peg. The woven scene, a hunt through a green forest, hounds chasing a stag, has faded to muted colours, but its thickness is what matters most. It will keep the chill from creeping into the hall when the air turns sharp. At the dais, the Lord's chair sits silent, its carved back catching the light from a narrow window. You check the cushions for wear, brushing away a small scatter of dust, and adjust the covering cloth so its embroidery lies straight. Nearby, a side table holds a row of pewter goblets, each polished to a soft gleam. You count them, noting one missing. It will be found later in the scullery, no doubt. Your steps take you along the outer wall, where the sconces stand ready for candles. You inspect each, making sure the holders are firm and the wax stubs removed. The smell of the hall, a mingling of old wood, rushes, stone, and the faint memory of past meals, feels steady, as it should. At last, you step back toward the centre and turn slowly in a full circle. Everything is in its place, ready for the day's life to fill it again. Soon the sound of voices will roll against the stone, the fire will blaze, and the hall will hum with warmth. But for now, you take in the rare gift of its morning stillness, a reminder that even the busiest places begin in quiet. The great hall in order, your thoughts turn toward the kitchens again, not for fire this time, but for the careful oversight of the midday meal. Managing midday meals, by the time you return to the kitchens, the air is warm and lively, thick with the scents of bread baking and onions softening in butter. The fire in the great hearth has grown strong, its flames dancing against the blackened stones. Around it, the servants work in a steady rhythm, knives tapping against boards, spoons stirring in deep pots, the soft thud of loaves being set onto the wooden counter to cool. The midday meal in a castle is no grand feast, Not on an ordinary day. It is meant to nourish without waste, a thick pottage of grains and vegetables, seasoned with herbs from the still room, fresh bread pulled from the oven, wedges of hard cheese, perhaps a platter of salted fish or meat if the stores allow. Your role is to see that all is portioned fairly and nothing is overlooked. You move between the tables, peering into pots and checking the texture of the pottage. It should be hearty enough to stand on a spoon, yet soft enough for the oldest in the household to eat comfortably. The cook nods when you taste it, her face relieved at your approval. On a side bench, you examine the loaves, pressing gently on their golden crusts to be sure they are baked through. At the far end of the kitchen, a young boy is slicing cheese. His knife slips too close to the edge, threatening to waste a piece, and you quietly guide his hand, showing him how to cut in even, economical wedges. The cheese is precious, made from milk gathered weeks ago, aged carefully in the cool pantry, and not a crumb should be lost. The servants have their own meal before the Lord's household is served, and you see that theirs is ready first. The same bread, the same pottage, the same care in preparation for the health of the castle depends on them as surely as it does on its lord. You watch as bowls are filled and passed along the wooden trestle, steam curling up into the air. When the signal comes that the great hall is ready, platters and baskets are arranged on broad wooden boards. You ensure the bread is placed where it will stay warm, the cheese where it can be cut easily, and the pottage ladled into serving jugs that can be poured without spilling. It is simple fare, but when prepared with order and attention, it feels abundant. Before the servants carry the meal out, you pause to sweep your eyes over the kitchen one last time. No ladle out of place, no pot untended. The fire is fed, the tables are cleared, and the scent of good food fills the air. You nod, and the procession begins, footsteps and soft voices moving toward the hall where the household will gather. When the last dish has left the room, you adjust the keys at your waist once more. The afternoon's work calls. It is time to walk the storerooms again, to see what has been taken, what must be guarded, and what will be needed next. Afternoon inventory rounds the corridors are warmer now, the sun filtering in through narrow windows and painting thin golden stripes across the stone. The air carries the mingled sense of midday wood smoke from the hall's great fire, bread still cooling in the kitchens, and the faint tang of ale from the barrels. This is the hour when the castle feels settled, its busiest work behind it, though your duties are far from done. You make your way back to the storerooms, the keys at your waist chiming softly with each step. The heavy oak doors open with their usual slow resistance, and the cool, dry air within greets you like an old acquaintance. This is your realm of quiet order, where nothing should be amiss. Starting with the grain sacks, you check the counts recorded in the morning against what remains now. 2 more sacks of oats have been moved for the kitchen, and you note the gap where they stood. You press your hand to the cloth of those still in place, feeling the firmness that tells you they're dry and secure. Next, you move to the barrels ale, beer, and cider. A single barrel has been tapped since morning, its wooden plug replaced neatly. You test the hoop with your palm. It holds firm, no sign of swelling or leak. The scent of malt lingers faintly here, warm and steady. On the hanging racks, garlic and onions sway gently in the cooler air, their skins rustling softly. You lift a string to inspect the bulbs. No softness, no dark spots, only the clean, sharp smell of good storage. You pause at the salted meats, checking the linen wraps for any sign of damp. The salt barrels themselves are still full, though one is beginning to clump. You will see to it that it's stirred tomorrow to keep it loose and even. A smaller cabinet at the far end holds the most precious stores, the spices delivered earlier. You unlock it, the iron key turning with a crisp click, and breathe in the mingled perfume, pepper's bite, cinnamon's warmth, saffron's rare sweetness. Everything is as it should be, the jars sealed tight, the powders and threads dry. Once your round is complete, you take a slow walk through the outer store, where dried peas, beans, and apples are kept. Here, the air is cooler still, and the faint smell of dried fruit fills the space. You make a note to bring in more from the market before the month's end. With the doors locked once more, and the keys secure at your hip, you step back into the corridor. The light is already shifting toward the softer tones of late afternoon. It is time to turn to the day's final tallies, the quiet ritual of closing the household's accounts before night falls. Evening settling of accounts. The small writing alcove is lit now by the low sun, its light slanting through the narrow window in a beam of pale gold. Dust motes drift lazily in that beam, swirling whenever you pass your hand through. You set the ledger upon the oak desk once more, the leather warm from being carried, and draw the inkwell and quill toward you. This is a different kind of quiet from the morning. Then, the pages were blank and the day still unwritten. Now, you carry the weight of hours lived. You turn back to the morning's entries, adding the changes, 2 more sacks of oats moved from the storeroom, a tapped barrel of ale, spices locked away. Beside each note, you mark the reason in your small, steady script so that months from now, it will make sense to anyone who reads. From the kitchen, a note arrives in the hands of a scullery boy, a request for more salt before the week's end, and a reminder that the cheese store is running low. You thank him, tucking the slip into the ledger's pages. The cheese will need to be rationed carefully. You jot a quiet warning beside tomorrow's meal plan. You open the small pouch at your side where the day's coin transactions are kept. From it, you remove the merchant's tally from the morning and match it against the goods received. The count is exact. You record the payment in the account book, marking the sum with a small flourish at the end, the way you always do when a trade is square and fair. The quill scratches steadily across the parchment, the sound familiar and soothing. Outside the window, you can hear the faint calls of children playing in the yard, the muffled conversation of guards changing their watch, and the far-off bleat of a sheep from the outer pasture. The life of the castle folds itself down into softer tones as evening draws in. When the ink is blotted and the ledger closed, you set the inkwell aside and smooth your hands over the page, pressing the day's record into permanence. The clasp clicks, shut with a satisfying finality. The books are in order. The household's memory is preserved. You rise, feeling the gentle pull of the keys at your waist. There is one last duty before you can rest the nightly walk through the castle to be sure every door is closed, every latch secured, every soul within safe for the night. Locking the castle for the night, the sun has slipped behind the hills, leaving only a wash of lavender light at the highest edges of the sky. Inside the castle, the corridors grow cooler with each passing minute, the day's warmth retreating into the thick stone. You take up your lamp, its small flame steady against the first hints of night air, and set out on the final circuit of the household. The great hall is your first stop. Now emptied of the day's voices, it feels vast again, the fire banked low, a slow bed of embers breathing faint heat. You check the windows' narrow slits shuttered tight and press your palm to the latch of each door, ensuring it holds firm. The benches are pushed neatly beneath the tables, the rushes swept of crumbs. All is in order. From there, you move through the side corridors, closing doors to storerooms and pantries one by one. Each lock turns beneath its proper key, the bolt sliding home with a deep, reassuring thud. You pause at the spice cabinet, turning the smaller, vine-shaped key in its lock before tucking it back onto the ring. The scent within lingers for just a breath as you close it, a whisper of cinnamon and saffron that will rest in darkness until morning. In the kitchens, the hearth is dimmed, the ashes raked, the pots scrubbed and set upside down to dry. The cook has left a loaf of bread cooling on the high shelf, tomorrow's first slices, and you smile faintly, knowing it will greet you when dawn comes again. You secure the back door and slide the wooden bar into place. The outer halls are quieter still. Only the guards pass here now, their torches sending warm ripples of light along the walls. You exchange brief words, all calm, no disturbances before checking the postern gates. The iron locks are sound, the hinges unmoving. Your last stop is your own chamber. The keys at your waist feel heavier now, each one having done its work. You hang the ring upon its peg beside your bed, the metal cool against your fingertips. The lamp is set upon the small table, its light pooling gently over the folded blankets, the little chest at the foot of the bed, the single chair where tomorrow's clothing waits. As you draw the bed covers around you, the castle settles too. Doors closed, stores safe, fires banked, people sleeping in their beds. Outside, the wind brushes softly against the walls, finding no way in. Inside, there is only the quiet, steady peace that comes when everything is in its place. You close your eyes knowing the keys will be waiting at dawn, ready to begin it all again.